Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
You deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Like, just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only.
Fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fight for Liberty Live. I'm your host, David Fite, here to get you fired up about people that are doing amazing things in the liberty movement all around the world. And today we have a super special guest all the way from across the pond. But first, as always, we're going to get into a couple of our sponsors and tell you a little bit about them. First up is Streamlabs Ultra. If you want to create a high-quality stream of your own, like this one, look no further than Streamlabs Ultra. It's an all-in-one streaming service that combines most of the needed functionality of OBS, Restream, Shopify, and Canva. The desktop program gives you a full open source broadcasting system with guest cameras and multi-streaming built right in. And the online dashboard helps you create logos, thumbnails, overlays, a merch store, a website, and so much more, all with more templates than you'll know what to do with. And that's just $19 a month or $149 a year. That's less than Restream or Shopify by themselves. So it's a really good deal. It's what I use. If you go over there and you use the promo code, if you click the link in the description, this one doesn't have a promo code. My bad, guys. Click the link in the description and you will get $9 off your first month or $10 off your first year. So go on over, check them out. They're a really great system, and like I said, it's what I use, and it has been an awesome upgrade compared to some of the old stuff. Next up is Crafton Business Services. Crafton is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs start, grow, and maintain their businesses by providing a wide variety of products and services to make your business more efficient, manageable, and profitable. Now, when was the last time you changed the cover photo on your business page? Has it been months, years? Does it reflect at all what you're currently working on, the people that you're working with, or the culture that you're building? Crafton has a great solution for you. You can test out our marketing and graphic design teams by sitting down with our marketing team to get a real feel for what you're trying to do with your business, and then having our graphic design experts create a brand new cover photo for all of your existing social media. And that's just $100. You get a couple hours of really advanced marketing experts help, and then a brand new facelift for your entire social media. So go on over to crafton.us/facelift to sign up for that today. And I'm really excited about these sponsors, so definitely go check them out. But without further ado, like I said, we have an awesome guest for you today. He is an artist, lecturer, editor, author of this book, if I can get back over to it, Compelling Speech. And he is the founder of the False Allegations Watch. Mr. Sean Parker, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Cheers.
Cheers to you as well. So I always like to start off with kind of a testimonial question, like how you got into it. So I want to know, how did you come to light on the drastic problem of false allegations, and how many people are suffering from that problem?
In the 2016, I was running a arts centre here in the UK on the south coast, and in the Christmas of that year, it was only open for about a year. I was subject to some allegations myself at the height of the Me Too movement, and so with that, I was arrested and I was on bail for 14 months. And in this process, over the next 4.5 years, I became something of an expert in the politics behind what's happening with false allegations. And eventually, last year, I was asked to be the editor of False Allegations Watch by the founder of Empowering the Innocent, Dr. Michael Norton at University of Bristol. And that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. That's well, I'm sorry to hear that about the your own experience with it. had a couple of run-ins myself throughout the years, but it's not a fun thing to have to go through, and it's a rough thing because you're putting other people in the position of, who are you going to believe? And it's as simple as, are you going to, victim blame, or, not believe a victim, or are you going to trust your friend? And you're putting all of the people that know you in a really rough spot, and just it's a really tough place to be in. So I'm just to start off, sorry that you had to go through that, because that is not a fun time.
That's right. It has become like I have an opportunity to study both systems, and how ours basically copies yours.
Well, my condolences there. We didn't give you guys a super great roadmap as far as that goes, but I mean, in some areas we did, I guess. So I guess my first question is, how do you find the people that you help, the victims that you're working with?
The False Allegations Watch, the network is also, and the Empowering the Innocent one. We're very big on social media. I've got a big sort of Twitter platform, and all of the old things too, like Facebook and all the rest of it, are all sort of tied into the False Allegations Network movement. So there's a forum, there's Innocence Art coming, there's all these things that work on behalf of the falsely accused, but it's a very strange corner of the justice reform industry, because it doesn't work in those people's interests, because they're all very progressive and right on and kind of woke and things like that. Our thing is not very woke. It's a bit more like what's happened to the principles of law.
Yeah.
So these things are in competition with each other, but we're all very sophisticated people. We are very aware of what woke means and all that, but we think it's gone, you could say, too far. But what I say is it's had too much cash chucked at it. It's an industry now. It's nothing to do with right and wrong.
It's turned into, especially what you just said, like a cash cow and a money grab, and kind of a shakedown artist kind of maneuver. It's almost like ambulance chasing, but just kind of the new and improved version of it in a lot of ways. And it's a very interesting, like you said, a corner of the criminal justice reform movement, because I mean, that's something that honestly got me into politics as a whole, and especially the brand of politics that I subscribe to as far as libertarianism, is because I believe that there's a lot of problems with the criminal justice system and a lot of things that need to be reformed in it. But like one of the longest things that it took me to break free from was the idea of the death penalty, because I bought into the fallacy for a while that it would just be cheaper and easier to just get these people gone, and why are we subsidizing these terrible people's lives, and so on and so forth. And what really broke me out of that was a lot of stories like this of false allegations and wrongfully accused, and evidence that was hidden that could have just cut and dry, plain as day, exonerated this person, but instead they're on death row for a murder they never committed. And there's just story after story like that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess I knew I didn't have faith in the legal system, but I thought I had at least a little bit. And now I can't even say, like, yeah, you were convicted by a jury, you probably did it. Even that, it's not as clear as day as it used to be.
No. And I don't think it ever really has been. When you got a jury, if you got a jury, and there's like the 9 of them are women, for example, for some kind of sex offence, then that is not a fair situation. They can pretend it's handpicked and all the rest of it, but not handpicked, that it's random. But there are all kinds of ways to kind of get these things to be in whatever you want, to manipulate them. And there's a big suspicion that these things are being manipulated. If the death penalty, we don't have the death penalty in the UK, of course. If we did, nice. then the power feminists, for want of a better term, would be pushing to have the death penalty for any degree of rape. and that can involve two people getting drunk and going to bed together. So
Mhm.
before you know it, you've got a million guys up for the death penalty. So
Yeah.
that is actually that's the logical slipstream of what could happen. Of course, we'll say it's not going to happen tomorrow, but who knows? That's how these things, if they're left unchecked or if they're not stood up to, and there's no resistance right now because of the Title IX stuff that you guys passed a few years ago. Not you, of course, your
Yeah.
government.
Yeah, not the biggest fan of that personally. You know, there's a couple different aspects of that kind of stuff that, you know, it seems good in theory, but in practice it's been awful. Same with you know, like affirmative action hiring and stuff like that. You know, it's, you know, to try to even the playing field, but kind of it's a disingenuous act that's belittling both sides, in my opinion, because if you're saying that you need this kind of stuff to protect you legally and you're not like fit to actually compete, then you're basically just giving into the either racist or sexist stereotypes that you're pretending don't exist. So, but that's a whole other conversation. How do you vet whether or not the people that are coming to you are, you know, victims of false allegations or, you know, guilty and just trying to get out of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a good kind of working relationship with Dr. Michael Norton. We talk every day about this kind of subject, and the criteria for false allegations watch is to present the side of people who claim to have been kind of wrongfully convicted. So from that perspective, it can be anything, and it doesn't matter if they're innocent or guilty. It's about their story, which hasn't been told in other media, and that's actually the first consideration, telling their story. What I check as an editor is to make sure that all the sides that have been reported and that they've told us are reported out there. And if there are questions, I can ask them that, and we can try to include them that in the story. There hasn't been anything that's come to us where it's been a question of did he do it, did he not do it. It's much more about what the process was, what went wrong. Mr. John Lee Osborne is a good example here, just to give you a quickie, who was a guy from Bristol here who was a veteran, and he got into a situation about 10 years ago with his ex-girlfriend of telephone text sex. And what happened was that he was pretending to be 5 different people because she split up with him, and forcing her to have sex with him because he would be beaten up by the person he's pretending to be. Right, and this went on for a couple of years, so it's pretty shit behavior, and that's acknowledged. But does that deserve 18 years in prison for a non-violent crime? Our point on false allegations watch is no, it doesn't. Right, because it's absolutely it was an acknowledged sex game. It was third-party reported, not by the complainant herself, by a friend, and it's an absolute disgrace. But it was a judge, and they're trying to push this through as an official law now, deceit sex, this year. But they already did this kind of 4 years ago with him. So we're saying, well, it already exists. So all these kind of different areas of consent are being contested, and we're very happy to put out the cases that talk about that.
Do you guys have the concept of jury nullification there, where a jury can say not guilty even if they believe them to be guilty just because they think either the crime shouldn't be a crime or the punishment doesn't fit the crime?
Wow. I would like to answer you honestly, and the fact is I don't know, so I better not. I'm going to have a look after this about jury nullification. We might well. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an editor, but now that's a thing that I can research. Thank you. Not
Fair
sure.
enough. Yeah, it's something that's very it's like it's systematically silenced here in the U.S. You know, if it's something that's joked about as, you know, if you don't want jury duty, just say the words jury nullification during the choosing process and you'll automatically get dismissed, because they don't let you go through with it if they know that you have this concept in your head. And they're doing a really good job of making sure that, you know, this isn't something you learn about in your textbooks or anything like that, but it is codified in law multiple places over in the US, where as a juror you have the right to say not guilty, to protect them from the punishment, even if you think they actually did what they're accused of doing, which is a really cool kind of tool that was built into our legal system that, you know, I wish was more widely known. But
yeah, that's really interesting.
So or go ahead.
They have got up in Scotland the unproven verdict, which I think is along the same lines, and the power feminists up in Scotland are attempting to get rid of that because the ex-boss of the Scottish National Party, Alex Salmond, was up for sort of 12 to 14 counts of sexual assault a couple of years ago, got exonerated of all of them, one of them unproven. And they were furious about this one unproven thing. But I think the unproven here is the same concept as the nullification there. Not sure about English and Welsh law, and I'll check that out and report back on it.
All right. So tell me how. Tell me the story of how you got involved in this, and you know, some of the first cases that you worked on, and you know how you got brought into this organization.
Yeah. When I was so the trial I was telling you about earlier didn't go my way in 2018, in the same week that Harvey Weinstein was being on trial, as I told you. And so off I went for 4.5 years, sort of 2.5 of them in the Dartmoor prison here, which is a very old, remote prison. And whilst I was there, I contacted Dr. Michael Norton and the falsely accused support organisation, FASO. And these people have been really supportive, and they gave me lots of materials about the history of this and the reasons that things can go this way without any evidence, etc. For like a one-night stand, basically, which I never denied, you know, but it was a drunken one on both sides. So just put it in a nutshell. And so then through this whole kind of process, I was talking to other people inside, and I kind of worked out quickly that a fifth of people in prison are maintaining innocence to some degree or other. And as you were saying earlier about jury nullification, it's not I'm completely innocent. It's just that didn't happen, and in that way. So, you know, when it comes to the terms sexual assault or rape, these things have become utterly grey, utterly strung out to about 15 different types and different scenarios. And they're trying to push that in terms of rape myths now by the Law Commission, which are sexual assault scenarios. So we call them in ETI alleged sexual assault scenarios. They're not rape myths. If you put the word first, rape, then you have that in mind. So that's the language first thing. And that's what needs to be avoided, because you're creating the reality in someone's mind before they've looked at what's actually happened, which is sex, a lot of the time just contested. So with all this study is how I got into it, and I became steeped in it inside, because you do, obviously, you get somewhat obsessed with your own case, but I don't like to be too obsessive, because I'm an artist and a writer. I actually like writing about music and art and culture and these things. So I do keep doing all that stuff. And this book I've got now, the one I just published on stammering. So, you know, I do have lots and lots of different interests. It's just justice reform is a very communicable subject, and it's obviously very impactful to people's lives, as opposed to other things I do, which are just more enjoyable, I suppose.
I definitely, when I read the bio, that I got from the blog, and we communicated through email a little bit, and set everything up a couple weeks ago. This one's been in the books for a while, and I knew what you were about as far as this, and then I actually looked you up and started researching for the episode. I was not expecting to find fine arts lecturer and all of these other things in the bio. You lead a very interesting and diverse lifestyle, that's for sure.
Messy is fine if you want to.
I don't know. I love it, because too many of the people that I know that are involved in stuff like just politics in general, whether it's news or activism or actual electoral politics, something along those lines, we get completely separated from the kind of spiritual, self-reflective side of the world and the kind of art stuff. Most of my friends who are authors are all they write is nonfiction. They write things that are just a breakdown of all of the stuff that they've read and done, and there's no real art to it. There's a little bit of art towards salesmanship and the spoken word, but that's about it. That's like all we really study. And I have a few friends that have been able to maintain that connection to whether they write actual fiction or they paint or draw or something like that. I have a few friends that are still musicians with their activism, and I personally find an added value to that, where I know that somebody is able to do both and kind of expressing some of what they're working on in one area of their life into the other. And it makes you, in my mind, usually a better activist, because you're not, like you said, obsessive and kind of, all consumed by your own justice or something like that. That can really just destroy a human. But if you actually have an outlet like you're talking about, that's a whole other thing. How did you get into the world of art?
I have been a artistically interested person since I was 14, and I did my first sketch of Prince, the cover of Love Sexy. So that was, I discovered that I liked the visual art then, and I got into a band, so like a grunge band, 89, 90 on the drums.
Nice.
So I could tell that I was already doing various different artistic expressions, and that's where I get my joy, and I have done since then. Now I'm 48, then's 14, and it's only got better. So what's happened is it's honed itself. I am now, we can call it a good writer. I actually respect what I do myself, which takes ages to get to that stage where you actually like what you're doing yourself. Everything else is just like, I hope someone else likes it. And what I enjoy to do is to make the connections between these different areas and fields. And Mr. Dr. Norton enjoys that as well. He's putting together Innocence Art at the moment, which is like an exhibition in London. He thinks that a lot of stuff that I've done over the last couple of years really speaks to issues within the innocence movement. But like we were saying before 2018, before High Me Too, I was a music writer for kind of Time Out Istanbul. I did the David Bowie album from 2013, did their review of it, and Louder Than War, operated by Mr. John Robb. I was in the indie world to a sense. I love that stuff, and I love old hip hop, old, not new, and indie, and just all kinds of shit I can talk about with you that isn't just. But what I've seen is that the intersectionality of all this stuff is quite interesting, and that's why I'm as interested in cancel culture as I am in justice reform, and I actually find them very closely connected. I've just done an article for CIEO, which is a think tank here, which talks about cancel culture, and because that's been the worst thing, is having my my stuff kind of taken off BBC. Kind of had a couple of plays on the radio that was taken down because of the conviction. I had the TED talk you mentioned that was taken down by TED. Not listening to my emails like these tech companies don't, and all because of a conviction which is wrongful. So that intersectionality is very interesting to me, and I report on that for False Allegations Watch too.
Yeah, I think there's a huge crossover between justice and cancel culture, because I firmly believe that the concept of cancel culture is really important and necessary for a healthy functioning society. We need to be able to say, hey, that guy is not okay and nobody should do business with him, and be able to kind of have some sort of a price that isn't jail time or just a fine or something like that, but an actual like societal price to pay for if you actually do something wrong, like a Harvey Weinstein, he barely even tried to defend himself. Like that one, he's definitely guilty, right? And like there's a thing to be said for like, maybe we shouldn't do business with somebody who's doing something like that, but it's getting abused and kind of turned political and against people in the same kind of way that the criminal justice system was used in a very either religious or racially skewed way for many decades. And it's starting to clean up a little bit, but now it's kind of skewing this opposite direction. And like I said, I think the concept of cancel culture is necessary, just like to a point the concept of criminal justice is necessary. You know, we have to be able to put murderers behind bars at the end of the day. And we should be able to say, hey, this person's a sleazebag, don't do business with him. But we need a way to actually have, you know, innocent until proven guilty. And that's something that we don't have with the cancel culture thing at all. And we barely have with our criminal justice system anymore.
Well, you talked about the Harvey Weinstein being definitely guilty, for example. And well, according to Claire Best, who's an American documentary maker, he was definitely guilty because he was £1 billion in debt. And as opposed to the Democrats having to bail him out and to carry that debt, they put him inside instead. So that's her take on it. Claire Best, she's a very good writer. When it comes to cancelling artists, let's say specifically artists, because what we're talking about, Picasso has been destroyed by the feminists for about 50 years. If he'd been put inside for his first kind of one-night stands back in the 30s, we wouldn't have got the other 20,000 of his 30,000 paintings that he was doing then in the middle of his blue period, for example. And he would have been inside doing them on very small scale. And if Mr. David Bowie had been had a Me Too on him for allegedly having sex with a groupie in 1972, when she was apparently 14 or 15 and he was 25, and he'd been Me Too'd, off he goes, we wouldn't have got his next 8 albums. So it's like, and Kevin Spacey's on trial in the UK at the moment for similar things. So
yeah, that one hurts.
Really
I'm a big fan of his as far as his work as an actor. You know, he's in 2 of my top 10 movies and 2 of my top 10 TV shows. You know, that one hurt when that allegation first came out, and he basically didn't. I mean, he fought it a little bit, but he basically went straight to the "I'm sorry" and bowed out of the public eye, at least for a while. That one was sad.
Well, it's only sad depending on the media you watch and read and analyze. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying there, David. I mean, kind of American Beauty is my all-time number 1, I think. Probably I can't think of one that I love more than that film. And him having an alcohol problem and being in the closet for years, which is pretty much what I see what happened, and behaving badly through that. You know, you're not entirely responsible for yourself in that. There's many mitigations to go through, and he succeeded in America. So we'll see what happens here. And the fact is, it's got nothing to do with his acting. He's one of the best for me. And the things against him, and almost everyone in the theatre is gay anyway. So you're like, all these things have been extended to this incredible situation that we got post Me Too, which is just a massive witch hunt. It's the puritanicalism gone mental. And sort of some of us are saying, just enough of this nonsense. Can we get back to some old Enlightenment hippie values, please? And I don't mean hippie in the way that your audience might not like. I just mean liberal in the sense of humanist. Yeah.
No, I honestly, my audience probably likes the word hippie no matter which case you're using it, but but yeah, I definitely, it's a conversation that it's been happening a lot over the last few years. And you know, I think I was trying to remember for the last few minutes which comedian I'm thinking of, but I was just watching a comedy special maybe a month or 2 ago where he was talking about how the difference in reaction to R. Kelly's music being played currently versus Michael Jackson. They were basically accused of the same thing. They're both found guilty of the same thing for the most part. And because one person's art is so much better than the other's, the public reaction to it is extremely different. R. Kelly's music is I mean, I was never a fan of his. He was a little bit before my time, and not something that I went back. I know maybe 2 or 3 of his songs. It didn't hurt me at all to just be like, okay, that's those songs aren't on the playlist anymore. Which I honestly don't think they were actually on a playlist of any kind. But you can't cut Michael Jackson out of your life. That's just a whole different thing. Or to your point, David Bowie. Like, I listen to Heroes probably once every other week at least.
Wow.
And there's nothing that's gonna make me stop listening to David Bowie or Michael Jackson.
That's such an interesting point here, because you're talking about the public image fitting with the allegation. With Bowie, in those days, he was such an odd-looking fellow and so out there that people are like, well, whatever he's done, it's never mind. It doesn't matter. And when it comes to Michael Jackson, there are very different attitudes on both sides of the pond with this, because over here we're much more like whatever about it. Right. I don't want to talk for all of England, but like you say about the quality, it's 100 incredibly good songs, and also the fact that everybody knows he's had his childhood. He didn't have a childhood because of dad and because of fame. That is a massive mitigating factor for very okay. I don't think anybody denies that he went to bed with boys at Neverland, but that's where the things then that's the point at which the money starts coming in, isn't it? So it's like then everything becomes whatever. Let's go and listen to Man in the Mirror, because that's what matters, And but the public image for Michael is so sweet that it's very, very difficult to handle. Mick Jagger has had scandals from the 60s on, and all of them battered away each time because he's been the bad boy since then. So your public image, and this is difficult for Kevin Spacey again, because everyone has a suspicion about him because of his acting style, is that he's a bit of a wrong 'un, as we call it here, which is just a person with a kind of problematic urge going on that he's hiding. He's acted that so well for so long that people have gone, told you. and so that is actually really at play, and you can't litigate for it. You can only really write about it and talk about it in things like this, and people are too scared to anyway, because everyone's been too scared to talk about the subject as is, and unlike us at the moment. I agree with you about R. Kelly. I'm like left cold by the music, but False Allegations Watch actually did a piece on him 6 months ago, because a fan of his did a brilliant piece listing his innocence. And so it's like, okay, here you go. This is his side, so we have covered him. But this subject is a real doozy.
Yeah, I think you've brought up a few times a really important thing of there are outside influences that affect people, and I'm all for personal responsibility and accountability and all of these other things, and I think it's a really important piece of being a whole and complete person. But not everyone is a whole and complete person, right? And to your point about Michael Jackson, like, I don't think he was ever a whole and complete person. Same with probably David Bowie, or there's plenty of painters and actors and some of these people who, especially if there's childhood fame or abuse or something else like that early on, drug problems later on, alcoholism, gambling, all of these other things that a lot of people from fame fall victim to. There's a lot of these outside influences, and you have to the question comes up a lot with all of these people, how much leeway do you give somebody because of that? Does it fully exonerate them? Obviously there's still somewhat to blame, and where does that line get drawn? Yes, I fully agree that Michael's childhood definitely gives him a lot of, I guess, sympathy or empathy for me, as far as how he was forced to live, and the kind of things that he probably thought were okay because he saw them as a kid and saw them his whole life and didn't really see anything wrong with it. And some people are just kind of fucked up, but they're still victims of that, and you can't bring that onto the next generation and keep that going and multiply that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a big question mark. Where's that line?
It's another really good point you raise. And if there's anything good about this century, intellectually and spiritually speaking, it's the transparency that people encouraged people like Michael Jackson to come out and to talk about the reasons that they're being like that, and to break that cycle, as you say, which is a very important thing to do. As I was in prison, I was a Samaritan's listener, which is a thing here, like being a counsellor, where you just listen and help people with their issues, as a thing to do inside to help, And of course, the stories that I heard from other prisoners, and it's like, for some reason, the transparency we're applying to all other parts of life, which have gone into creating the woke movement, which is universal human rights pushed to insane degrees. Wanting to, at the moment, you've got the trans men who are pregnant and taking testosterone, which is harming the baby, but the sociologists are saying it's good to take testosterone because the baby should be weird. That is where that woke argument has come to, and that is basically bonkers. It's insane. And so that is the other extent of the let's analyze this Michael thing. So you kind of go, what's wrong? And you try to help the person and to go, it's not really appropriate to go to bed with children like that, Mike. And I know, but I want to love people. Yeah, of course you do, but there are certain things we can't do, and we have to help other people through these things, and also to be honest about it. And being honest that's the great thing about the podcast revolution, is that people like you let the door open to proper conversations beyond politics into how people actually are and respond. And when you've gone through an experience like I have, and you have all these different sides to everything going on, all you want to do is a honest and open conversation about it.
Yeah.
Not sure if I answered you.
Yeah, we used to have like what was that, 60 Minutes was about the closest thing you had to something like that, where you got to hear a full story laid out completely, and it wasn't the sound bites for the news, it wasn't the top 5 at 5 or whatever. It was actually a full hour of this story, but it's cut up, it's coming up on was a good third of it, and then you've got the ads and everything else in there. You're actually really only got maybe 20-25 minutes of real content there, and it's still overproduced and edited by the mainstream media and filtered, and it's one show a week. It's one story per week that got to get told, and it was normally a story that was already somewhat getting told by the mainstream media. This was just a better telling of it. Now, like you said, with the podcast revolution, we have, my show has a number of different kind of topics and people on, but there's plenty of shows that are entirely dedicated to stuff like this, of whether it's false allegations or just criminal justice problems in general, of really hearing other people's stories and promoting them. We have people like here we have Spike Cohen with You Are the Power, who goes to city council meetings and local courts and argues on behalf of people. He's not a lawyer, but he goes and gives the public speaking time slots in local city councils to argue for releasing body cam footage or something like that, and actually arguing for these people. And there's starting to be this kind of uptick in something working like that.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that just over the last couple of years that the US system has been starting to let more people out, or to not let them out, but not to have that many people incarcerated. About 4 years ago, it was at chronic, like 1 million people or something, right? But now apparently that's coming down, so I've heard.
It is. There's been a lot of people being released for drug possession charges. That's something that the U.S. is finally starting to, because for the longest time there were people in prison in, say, California or Colorado, or these states that are world famous for being the places that we can have weed. There's still people rotting in jail for having weed prior to those things being legalized, and some of these people are serving 10, 15, 20-year sentences, so they'll still be there for a while. And so we're finally getting to the point where some of those people are being let out. To a lot of people's surprise, Donald Trump pushed forward a bill and then signed it that was called the First Step Act that, overturned a lot of convictions for minor possession in states that were already legal. And a lot of those states, including New York and California and some of these other states, are finally starting to let people go. So that's a beginning to it. There's other states that have passed laws where you're not getting arrested at all for possession, whether it's cannabis or heroin. So states like Oregon and Washington have kind of turned that more into a mental health and physical health crisis than a criminal justice issue. And so there's a couple of decent reforms going on in our criminal justice system that's definitely starting to turn the tide. We'll see how much that lasts, because our prison industrial complex, most of our prisons are private for-profit prisons, and they control a lot of our government. Let's just put it that way. They have a lot of power in their lobbies. So I'm sure that we're going to find some new law to make up for all of the loss in revenue for these changes that we've made so far.
Oh wow, that's very interesting stuff. That's the part beyond the Title 9 stuff, which I've only been educated about in the last year. That's the place beyond that, isn't it? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
you give me a couple of things to like that I'm gonna have to go and research, which is fabulous. I love that.
Man, I usually get to learn a lot on these episodes, and I have already, but it's it's rare and it's fun when I get to teach a little bit. It's neat.
Yeah, teachable moments.
So what's the success rate that you've seen so far as being able to get people's stories out there and get the truth out there, and maybe getting people to not have to face the same consequences that you and I did?
Well, that's hard to gauge, because all we're doing is reporting. The success factor would be the fact that a bunch of different kinds of media outlets are interested in our story. So each time, or what we're doing like this, so each time something good happens, like Epoch Times, like it's quite big, and then you go to CIEO, which is very respected, and then to the Cardiff News, which I was doing earlier. All these things are quite significant kind of media things who are interested in talking about the things that we're on about. So that's the level of success, is having an open conversation. When people say the word rape or sexual assault, they go, whoa, they recoil. And we know exactly why they recoil, because they're the most heavy words in English, really, and a couple more, the N word, the C word. There are certain things you can't say, or maybe we could hear, but we won't, right? But it's like you recoil. And what we want to do is get past the recoil, because we're talking about legal situations, and the terms have been made what they are not in this country, and I think in yours as well. So when it comes to success, we can't really gauge it, because we're not actually doing cases. But we are trying. The CCRC Watch, which is the thing that Dr. Norton started before False Allegations Watch, is handling the cases of John Lee Osborne, who I mentioned, with the deceit sex, Mr. Jeremy Bamber, who was a big case here in the 1980s, who was put away for killing 5 members of his own family, but he's got many reasons why this didn't happen. Well, it wasn't him. It was supposed to be his sister with schizophrenic problems. This is his claim, and so we report on his. This is a really high-level case, and there are a bunch of these ones too that we do with CCRC Watch. Them becoming overturned or being seen by CCRC Watch, they're never going to say this is because of CCRC Watch's work. So we're not even going to know. But we're just happy, as I say, to report on the stances of the people who claim to be falsely accused. That's our kind of watertight sort of place in sort of free speech discourse. Whether they're guilty or innocent, this is their story. which is very valuable, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it's kind of a crux of the whole system. Like I mentioned earlier, this kind of innocent until proven guilty that requires hearing their side of it, and there's a huge rise in not wanting to do that, and it's important that there's people like you out there making sure that their sides of the story really are heard. Tell me a little bit about the book Compelling Speech. How did you decide to write that, and what's it about?
Yeah, thank you. Compelling Speech. There you go. It's only 100 pages, but it's an autobiography of the aspect of having a stammer in life and what that does, and also the effects it's had on other people who stammer in society. Like, there are lots of famous people that people don't know have stammer because of either how they control it or how they've internalized it, or kind of to Marilyn Manson, not Marilyn Manson, Marilyn Monroe. Sorry, Marilyn Manson, Marilyn Monroe. Also to Samuel L. Jackson, and basically a bunch of very big Americans who also have a stammer, and some Brits, Mr. Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, and King George. There are lots of them, and everyone has a different one. As your people can tell, I have one too. It comes and goes. It was terrible in prison. I couldn't speak for 6 months after the trial because of the shock, and because I hadn't spoken. But after being a teacher in Istanbul for 10 years, I got it up to that point to a place where I was quite fluent, like this, I suppose, able to get by. From kind of doing the teaching of cultural studies in English. Then prison took all that away, and whilst I was in there, I'm like, well, what does one do with this time? And I'm just a writer. And I started to write. Then I go to the print workshop in the daytime to do the prison magazine. So I was the editor of the prison magazine there, probably not a surprise to you. And so I would then do the articles out of the news, done for a prison audience, and when I had the downtime, work on the book Compelling Speech, and a couple of others too for a future thing. But so I just put on in the story about how stammering is seen in society, the places it comes from, which is the nature, the nurture, and a degree of spiritual cosmology, really, like the person that you are. So put all these different sort of kind of theories into it, because people always say, where does it come from? And it's another thing where people don't want to go there. So obviously I've got a bit of a line in going to places that people don't want to go. They don't want to say, why do you stammer? They don't want to know why you're in prison. They don't want to say these things. So I just give them the permission to say things. That's what I do with my art. I give the permission to people to go there, I suppose. That's what the book's about.
I like it. I think that's a really important. It's a really important thing. I want to kind of highlight towards the end what you were just saying there, because it's something that I do a decent amount of work with a good friend of mine, Thomas Queter, who's a disabilities advocate here in New York State, and he has a very similar philosophy of, it's just kind of a life philosophy of, if you don't talk about it and you don't address it and you just kind of hide it, it's worse for everyone involved, because it kills conversations and friendships and everything, and it just makes life awkward. But on top of that, it saves you, or it stops you from ever being able to improve on any of that stuff, or find help, or find ways to actually be useful in that person's life. If there's a way to I don't know if going over a speech with somebody else first is something that's helpful to you, and if a friend is never willing to ask, then they'll never know that, hey, can you give me 10 minutes of a phone call? Let me get this out and kind of run through it with somebody on the other line. You need to be able to kind of have these conversations, talk about it openly, make light of the situation. It's a really tired old joke, but I make it a lot that I like, if my friend has a problem with any of the jokes that I make about him, he can stand up for himself, which obviously can't. He's in a wheelchair. But and so it's just, it's a really important thing to, like you're saying, just kind of give people permission, because nobody wants to do that. So, unfortunately, not only do you have to deal with the situation itself, but it kind of ends up on you to, like you're saying, give them permission to talk about it and kind of open that dialogue. So that's really cool.
That's exactly what this book's like as well. Exactly that little gag about the wheelchair. It's full of that kind of dark humor, and that's been picked up on by Stammer, who are the British Stammering Association. They just did this review of it, and they've worked out that I'm a person who stammers with this disability thing going on, but also I just don't like bullshit. So it's got a whole stream of that in there, which is, let's talk about what's going on. If a person has a massive thing in the middle of his forehead, let's talk about the massive thing in his forehead before we talk about other things, so and whatever that might be. And if you're a good pal, there's no reason you can't talk about that stammer. And what happens? The stammer will become lesser in almost all cases. So
yeah, and you're not a good friend if you say, if your friend is about to go on a big date and he's stopping over at your place first to, grab something, left his tie there, and, puts on the tie, goes, "How do I look?" And you go, "Great, you're going to knock him dead." But his collar looks like this, and the tie's a little bit crooked, and he's got a stain on the suit jacket that he can't see because it's like up here on the shoulder. Like, you're not a good friend. Like, that, you're setting him up for disaster there. And it's similar with some of these other things. If you're not willing to talk about things and be honest with your friend, and in turn honest with yourself about how other people perceive you, you're never going to be able to kind of really get ahead in life and have people perceive you any other kind of way. You don't want to be just the guy with the whatever disability. You don't want to just be the guy with the big nose. You don't want to just be the guy with the crutches or the cane or something like that. You're a human, and if you're not willing to kind of figure out how to go above and beyond that, you're gonna kind of just get stuck with, oh, you're just that guy. For me, I always used to be the guy with the big ears. You can't see him under the headphones, but
I'm still him. Good move. But, that's a very good point as well. And when it comes to the stammering community, such as it is, I don't like this word community. It doesn't cover anything as far as I'm concerned. But when it comes to people who stammer, they are all completely different, and there are some who people have different kind of openness levels, don't they? Over there and over here. What I do know is culturally that Brits are much more repressed in general than American people. We know that as a cultural truism, So we have even higher to go, but we also have a much more higher bullshit level. So if it comes, we're happy to call it out. I think here to a certain degree, because it's such an industry over there, which you export quite well with bullshit, but that only when it comes to it's not all of it is, of course. Some of it's really helpful and true, but the individual person, I have a very high degree of, I suppose, openness is the term, but it's like I don't have secrets. I don't like them. I've never told a lie that I can remember in life. That's not about being a good person. It's just I don't like to lie, and I don't see the point, And but there are other people who like secrecy. It's a part of their nature, and they're actually comfortable with that. So you have to also respect that degree of comfort, and that's the tricky part. Because courts and things, and police rooms don't really respect that degree of secrecy that person requires. No, so all those little things, that's the kind of thing that I learned as a teacher and a Samaritan too, is that it's not all just about, we all need to be open, because, to make a mark, we can't all just be open like that. It's not in everyone, as you'll see with Harry soon, probably. So, just a bit of pop culture in there for you.
It's funny. I've never cared about that royal couple at all, but I just started watching the show Suits, where Meghan is a main character, and I honestly don't know how I've not seen this show before, because it's right up my alley. Something that I should have been watching, when it was coming out, really. So it must have been on a channel that I, didn't have access to or something. But I love the show and I love her character, and I'm like, maybe I'll care about the royal couple after all.
Oh, okay. I have to take your word for it. I don't watch anything off YouTube anymore, so I'll except for YouTube.
Fair enough.
Oh.
It's funny that you're talking about this kind of like cultural repression of England, kind of being even worse than it is here. And I think that's one of the many ways where the term New England really fits the northeastern part of the United States, where we still have a lot of the English culture where the South and the West have never really had much English cultural influence, where we do, and we're still pretty proud of it, especially if you're in like Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, those areas. They're still very, very proud.
The nice areas.
Yeah, exactly. And I grew up in upstate New York. All of the names of the streets around me are either Native American or some British general or soldier from pre-Revolutionary War time. It's one of the two. And so, but it's one of the ways that I would say we carried on a lot of that culture is we're still very much more, real men don't cry, real men don't talk about their feelings. This kind of stuff isn't something that's talked about. You don't talk about politics or religion at the dinner table. All of those kind of like cultural rules of like we don't talk about this kind of stuff, it's a no is way more rampant up here in New England than I would say in the South and the West. You go to a dinner table in the South and they're going straight to the punch of there's an elephant in the room, we're going to talk about it, god damn it. And where here it's like it's been 12 years, we haven't talked about it yet, we don't need to talk about it now. I completely hear what you're saying there. And as you were going down that journey, it becomes clear that it's possible to have both, isn't it? You can have a depth of culture of the New England going to the Old England, let's say. Why not? Because we're proud of it and we should be. I'm doesn't make me a racist to say that. And also being able to go to the elephant in the room at the same time. I don't know why that's such a difficult thing, and it's not a left or a right thing, is it? Or it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be. There are some kind of older people who don't like talking about sex, but because of what's happened to the culture, they've found that they sort of have no choice but to now, and I'm kind of encouraging them to do so, and they feel much better when they do. But we're not talking about describing the sex act. We're talking about ideas around sex, Yeah. And so people are getting better at that. And it's so important because it is everything about it's still such a taboo. But like you say, we can talk about David Hasselhoff and the Blackadder and Monty Python, and also talk about being open and a Samaritan and being able to have a brilliant podcast at the same time. Yeah,
I hope we can. That's the idea, isn't it, going forward?
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with what you're saying about sex specifically and the conversation there. A few weeks ago, I had a sex and relationship coach on the show and we were talking about kind of overcoming societal and sexual trauma. Mostly for women, and how they can kind of break free from that and live a freer life. Was kind of the how it fit into Fight for Liberty. But I'm a very big fan of both sex positivity and kind of an openness on the topic, because I think to go all the way back to how we started the conversation, I think that it's one of the key ways to get out of this culture, both sides of it, the abusive Me Too side of culture, but also the undeniable, rape culture that we've had in the U.S. for quite some time, of people being able to get away with it, and it just kind of being bro culture or whatever. This kind of like frat boy mentality is something that's undeniably there, and I think both sides of it come from this lack of wanting to talk about it. And, you know, we're not allowed to really be open about what we want, whether, you know, men or women. You know, we're not allowed to just like meet somebody at the bar and say, hey, I'd like to sleep with you. Would you like to sleep with me? Yeah, sure. That sounds fun. And then go and do it. You know, you have to, a woman has to play hard to,
that way, does it?
you know, women feel like they have to play hard to get, otherwise they'll be treated like a slut, which is an unfortunate truth. And so men are taught that, you know, no doesn't mean no, and no means try harder, and no means ask again in a day or two, because that's just the culture that we've designed. And luckily the younger,
but it's also but that's also the reality. It's not just the culture we've designed, it's how people are designed to be. There's a, you know, if with the no means no, it's such a simplistic way of looking at what's an incredibly complicated situation with those people at the bar. And this is the reason that the work I'm doing with False Allegations Watch is heading towards conflict resolution. Before arrest, before trial, any of that stuff, they need to get in a room and say what happened between you two, how much of an apology would be enough. If there's any violence, then you might want to go to the magistrate's court and to discuss that. But what is the violence is being up for massive discussion. So the term kind of rape culture, I know what you mean, but it's been stretched into many difficult, let's say over here, it's into such difficult forms as to mean anything male, and that's not acceptable. So that's the other problem behind what you've just alluded to.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. There's a part to it that is, like I said, undeniable and there, but this kind of, you know, the rise of the Me Too movement and everything else, everything that we've been talking about this whole time is creating a system where way too many things that aren't rape fall into that category now. I completely agree with you. But like I was saying, I personally think that just both genders being significantly more open and honest about how they feel and what they want and where they're trying to go with everything would result in less of, you know, the Me Too movement, also less of the, you know, men go their own way kind of red pilling, whatever you want to call this movement of men who are, you know, this proud independent man who doesn't need a woman kind of group. You know, we both sides are continuing this divide and marching even further in the opposite direction. And the only thing that's going to bring them back together is, like you're saying, conflict resolution, a conversation, and an understanding, you know, how somebody feels wronged, in what way they feel wronged, and what we can do to make them no longer feel wronged. And if we can do that, then we have a way of moving forward. But if we continue this just, you know, it's their fault, whichever side you're on, then, you know, we're going to end up really screwed.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, at the moment, the establishment cards are highly funded on the power feminist side. So the whole of the vogue, the violence against women and girls, the things that have caused the MG Tao and the men's rights movement, these things have caused it, because there is very little reason to get married anymore or to be with anybody past prostitution, for example, or, you know, just having someone for casual sex sort of thing. There's almost no reason for it anymore, and that's what they're responding to. I'm not a men's rights activist, though there's obviously a lot of those people around me, and I've got very little complaints about them because I know exactly where they're coming from, and they're talking from an objective place. But what you're talking about is somewhere beyond there, which is where I am as well, which is about let's make it better. And unfortunately, let's make it better doesn't go for impact because it's not very controversial. What they want is controversy, but it's important that you keep on that good way about going to the place beyond all this shit. But at the moment, there's a lot of money in all this shit, and both of our governments they can't say a positive word about men. And until they do, the MG Tao people are kind of right to keep being angry, you know? But I don't want that anger any more than you do. So it's like trying to balance it all like that and trying to report on the stories of the falsely accused is all I can do, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know where I'm...
I think I will say I think our government has fallen a little bit less of a victim to this than yours has from my experience, just what little I know of what you guys are going through. There's definitely, you know, a lot of feminists in Washington DC, and a lot of these kind of, you know, hyper woke kind of trying to weaponize these kind of fear-mongering tactics, whether it's race baiting or sex baiting or whatever it is. There's a lot of that in Washington, but it is a minority of one party and an even smaller minority of the other. For the most part, it's weird. Most of the people that are, you know, even senators or governors in the US have a very low public profile. They're not really getting involved in any of this kind of stuff. They're not taking too many of the kind of culture war issues to light, and they're just kind of taking a back seat and just trying to do their best. And as much as I hate almost everyone in government in the United States, I do genuinely think that a good chunk of them are delusional in that what they're doing is good, but genuinely trying to do something that's good, and just kind of trying to stay out of it. You know, we obviously have like our AOCs and our Nina Turners and our you know, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and there's people out there that for sure are using this kind of stuff to further divide the country, but it's not the large percentage that I've heard that it is over there, at least. Which is, you know, it's quickly catching up, but we'll see. You know, we have the conservative side of the country that's starting to do the same thing, where, you know, they're race baiting in the other way, or they're running black people and being like, hey, haha, we can't be racist, we ran a black person. And, you know, meanwhile, that person has been a lifelong conservative, grew up in a white neighborhood, went to a ritzy school, you know, like, you know, doesn't speak to the socioeconomic differences or anything else that people are actually talking about. It's just tokenizing somebody, which isn't any better than what the Democrats are doing. And so it's getting worse progressively, but we're not quite to the point where it's controlling the conversation, like I've seen it over there. But
it's kind of controlling. It's sort of controlling the cultural conversation. But as you allude to, when you walk out of the door into the town and you go and talk to a friend, nobody gives, not the friend's going to talk about it, but it doesn't affect your actual life when you go out there, until you come to things like Twitter, or what happened to me a few years ago, getting cancelled on the BBC and all that. Not that I was earning much money from BBC plays, but you want that stuff up there, you know, and when it's taken away, when you get cancelled, it's a real kick in the head, as you probably know. And that's the problem. But that kind of thing.
Yeah. I you know, I had a situation quite a few years ago, before I really got into politics or anything like that, where, you know, there were false allegations, but they were, you know, he said, she said, in a case that there was no chance of me winning in trial. I was given a plea deal, so I took it. And so I have a criminal record from something that I stand by never happened. And I didn't consider what was going to happen to my professional life after that. You know, like I said, I wasn't in the public eye or anything like that. I hadn't gotten into politics or anything yet. I was planning to, and I knew that this would be a problem. But I thought I had a few years before I really had to worry about it. And then just applying for retail jobs, you know, jobs that I'm overqualified for. You know, I had run multiple stores, you know, assistant manager, never head manager, but, you know, I was applying for third or fourth on the totem pole, stores that I know in and out. You know, I was in menswear, so, you know, suits are suits. And, you know, I was applying for jobs in places that, you know, I would have knocked these jobs out of the park. And you know, getting an interview, feeling like I crushed the interview. The person's like, I look forward to calling you with an update. We just have to run the background check. And 0 phone calls. I actually got into the industry that I'm in now. I could probably go back to retail now if I wanted to, but I got into you know, small business finance and helping small businesses because it was the only job that would take me at the time. I was living in New York City, and I saw a Craigslist ad for a telemarketing job that, you know, they were taking everybody. One of my best friends there literally had just gotten done with a 3.5-year prison sentence for, he got caught with a literal semi full of cigarettes that he was trucking from Virginia up to New York City to sell illegally. And he was sitting at the desk next to me.
Old school crime.
Yeah. Yeah, he had like some 10,000 cartons of cigarettes and like 1,000 pounds of weed on him in a semi, and got caught. And so they hired him. So I was nothing compared to that. And that's how I got into the industry as a whole, was just because I didn't even consider it when I was taking the deal. I was like, it's not worth trying to fight in court and ending up in prison for a year. So I'm just going to take the deal and move on. And moving on was not nearly as easy as I thought it was going to be. And I ended up, I haven't worked in retail since.
Right. Well, it's a very difficult thing. And I have become the European correspondent for the NARSOL, which is the National Association of Professional Sex Offence Laws over there. And they're a really cool organization, very, very factual and detailed, and attempting to reform the registry, which, as you're probably aware, is like 1 million strong now or something over there, and it's 100,000 over here. And it's just, for people, when you're maintaining innocence, there's no risk. For loads of other people, there's no risk, but they have to treat everyone as high risk. And all the safeguarding stuff you allude to, we have all those problems, like I was kind of telling you about with the editor's job from me earlier. All the safeguarding you got to go through for something that didn't happen is utterly, and that's just something that didn't happen. And then when something did happen, they're blown out of all proportion because of this rather over-the-top health and safety culture. I hope that, that's a very right-wing thing to say over here. I don't like the health and safety culture, but I find it has a lot to, because everyone wants to protect the children, right? And I have nothing against protecting children, but it's like we can go too far with trying to coddle the entire population in such ways,
Yeah. The phrase nanny state exists for a reason, because, it's for far too long, almost every brand of tyranny that's come out has been, for the children. Even I think they do a really good job of illustrating that and kind of highlighting it in the movie V for Vendetta. Not sure if you're familiar, but the original storyline is the orphanage or whatever, and the kids, and they started all of this crackdown on everybody because of the kids. And even here, I don't know, not sure what your opinion on gun laws are. I know you guys have gone a lot further towards the gun control side than even we have. Our conversation is revolved around kids who are not of legal age to have guns, getting guns illegally, going into gun-free zones, and then using them, and their response is, let's make them more illegal for the kids. And it's almost always this, what you're saying, like a safety, protect the kids culture. I like that. You said health and safety culture. I like that. That's not a phrase we use over here, but
that's what they call it here.
I think we just pretty much call it wokeism.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's a word that's so overused, but it works, doesn't it? And like, we don't have the gun laws that you have, obviously, but we watch yours very carefully and with a great interest, because it's kind of exotic. Because we haven't got a constitution that says you can have them and it's written there. So we don't have that. And we don't have them as a market, of course, which is probably even stronger. Mm-hmm. Thus, it doesn't have the same kind of huge cultural conversation cache that it does there. In 1997, there was a shooting at a primary school up in Scotland, the Dunblane. Mr. Andy Murray, the tennis player, was in that shooting, and 15 children, I think, killed. It was a terrible tragedy. I was 17, I guess, at the time. Something. How old was I? 22. And it was a terrible thing. And then all of the remaining guns that we had, which weren't many, were pretty much banned. So we are essentially a gun-free society, except for the gangsters who have them anyway. Yep. in the town cities, town centres. which is a world that I don't really know very much about. So that's how we don't manage it.
Yeah. I always find it very interesting talking to people from whether it's England or France or Australia or some of these countries that haven't had guns for quite some time, where there's been time for society and culture to kind of set in to this idea of, the only people with guns are criminals and police. And there's because we're here, that idea is just kind of unfathomable to most people, regardless of what side of the argument they're on. Even your strongest gun control advocates in the US don't think that they're ever going to be successful enough to get to where you guys are. And especially not anytime soon, to where we would have this kind of 40, 50 years later, like you're talking about. I think it's been a little over 30 in Australia. There's a long time to show what actually happens when you give up guns. And until 3 or 4 years ago, Australia and New Zealand were both pretty good examples of what could happen if you give up your guns. There really wasn't that much crazy stuff going on in Australia. And then they had their police shooting protesters in the streets during COVID, and you're like, see, that's why you need guns. And then, England is doing the thing where now they're banning knives and screwdrivers and box openers and everything else that could be used for violent crime, and just cracking down crazy. And I don't love the violent crime that we have here, but I'd rather have freedom than safety at this point.
So that's the way to put it, and I couldn't agree with you more. And this is a problem with the emasculation of culture. I think we've established by now that I'm not some sexist MRA guy, but I am happy to talk with you about the fact that we have become emasculated, and that means when you let the dominant decisions be feminized, then you're going to have risk-averse responses everywhere, and health and safety, and like, can't do this. What about the children symptoms? And all of those reactions, which are basically anti-adventurous, anti-male, anti-bold. And so what I think that you and I are trying to do is trying to get to a place past that. But the politicians are still over here anyway, are very into the women's vote, because the women do go out and vote these days because they're being made kind of increasingly empowered, which is a great thing. But when you empower health and safety, you can quite quickly see a race to the bottom, and then you have kind of crazy people who are considered crazy, like you and me or whoever, or Bowie or R. Kelly, whatever these people are doing, males being their male selves, going out and somehow being seen as toxic. And the whole toxic masculinity thing is totally overblown, in the same way that the rape myths are that I was referring to earlier, because they're going for term first, details afterwards. So the emasculation of culture in terms of health and safety is a bit of an issue, and it's another thing that needs to be talked about more openly.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there's definitely a happy medium there, because if you rewind 100 years, the extremely masculine culture of government was probably not super great either. And if you rewind maybe 200-300 years, it gets worse and worse as you go back with, constant wars and aggression and all of this other stuff. And, not giving a shit about the children for, we're either sending them to coal mines or to war. And, either way, we don't really care. We started to see an improvement there, and some of it was necessary. I'm not a fan of child labor laws anymore, but when they came into place, they were important. We didn't need 12-year-olds in sweatshops and coal mines. That was a problem. But now, like you're saying, the pendulum has swung way too far in the other direction, and now it's you're not allowed to do anything that's very risky. And like I'm saying, I'm not a fan of child labor laws anymore. I think that if you're a 14-year-old that has an idea and a thing that they want to do, go for it. Whether that's mowing lawns or developing software and opening an LLC and selling that software. If you're smart enough to do it and it's marketable, go for it. And we have a bunch of laws in place that say no, you can't do that, not without parents' permission and a whole bunch of other hoops that you have to jump through. And I don't think that that's a reasonable way to live life anymore. We've come far enough as a culture where we respect the children and want to keep them safe that we don't need the nanny state and the government making sure we do that.
Excellently put there, I think, David. And it's we don't have to go backwards. In the positions of power in both our countries across the Anglosphere are people who hate us because of our masculinity, and that is a problem. And I'm happy to use the word hate because the radical ideologues, radical feminists, and that's a problem. And they're never going to call themselves that because they are happily getting on with policy, whilst we're all going, what the fuck is going on? and that is not a sustainable thing. So the fact that we talk about it more and more is very important. And we don't want the bad child labor stuff back. We don't want the Handmaid's Tale. They get scared that we're going to go to some Handmaid's Tale situation. Well, no, we're not. Not unless you do that to yourselves, which you might be at risk of doing if you're not careful. It's the women, it's the other women who will get much more angry with the feminists than the men do. They can't bear what they're doing. So there's a lot of internecine warfare going on there because of this entire anti-us thing. And the reason that the alt-right, Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro, people that we have increasingly more time for, because when you hear Jordan Peterson, I don't hear a fanatical right-winger. I hear a bloke talking sensible shit, and everybody in this country does when they actually listen to him. Yeah. And that's actually the way forward. There's no hate there. It's just being packaged as hate. And that's the problem, getting past this hate packaging.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there's two sides of a war takes two sides, right? And so the culture war is being stoked by both sides of it at this point, in my opinion. And I think that it's unfortunately the promise of fame and popularity, and not even in a selfish way, but just in a genuine better ability to get your message out there and help the people that you're trying to help. Like Jordan Peterson, I think is completely doing everything he's doing because he thinks that he is helping people and getting an important message out there. I don't think he's in it to get famous and rich at all. But this promise of more clicks, more views, whatever, if you kind of actually take a side in this war, has brought a lot of people like him to talk more about his own kind of hate for the other side, which I don't think he has a hate for, the LGBT movement like people claim he does, but I think he does have an actual hatred for the left and the woke and the other side of this culture war at this point that 10 years ago he didn't. He was just trying to be someone kind of in the middle, speaking truth and trying to kind of moderate what he thought was going to explode into this culture war. And it became very clear that if he was going to try to just stay in the middle, he wasn't going to get anywhere. And the same kind of thing has happened to people who 10 years ago were hardcore leftists, like Dave Rubin or Joe Rogan, some of these other names where you don't get the popularity that you need to be sustainable in the podcasting or blogging or news industry without taking some stances on the LGBT issue, the COVID issue, some of these other things that, you have to have a choice, or you have to have an opinion on, parents' rights and what they're teaching in school and whether or not they're letting these kinds of books be taught in your schools. And you have to have an opinion on it. And if you don't, you're not going to get on to anybody's show and you're not going to get any of that kind of popularity. But I 100% agree with you that 90% of what I hear out of somebody like Jordan Peterson is sensible, wonderful, awesome, makes your life better if you actually listen to it kind of stuff. His the stuff that got him popular in the beginning, the like clean your room, make your bed kind of things, are fantastic. And I have him to thank for a lot of personal growth and development from my early 20s, but unfortunately the kind of stuff that he's talking about now, he's saying a lot of that, but it's muddied down with a lot of stuff that's going to make 45% of the country never listen to anything he has to say and not hear that really important stuff like clean your own room first. And I wish that more people were able to kind of exist in this middle ground and help both sides and kind of bring them together. I don't know if we're ever going to actually see that, but we'll see.
Oh, no, it's the fact that we're able to talk about these important people is really interesting to me, and that we're both aware of who we're talking about. That's what I like about internet in general. I think that you're hinting towards the kind of towards a trans thing, which is possibly a thing we could get into next time if you wanted to. It's a massive one, isn't it? So I mean, it's so complicated, and it's very, very, very tricky stuff, because is the T entirely necessary on the LGB? Because there's a huge argument about that over here at the moment. So.
Yeah, we can save that one for next time.
It's massive.
But before we wrap up, I do want to give you a chance to tell people how they can find out more about Empowering the Innocent and where they can find your books and everything. Give you a chance to shout out any websites or social medias that people should be following and looking up.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, do have a search of Compelling Speech, the Stammering Enigma, under my pen name, Sean B.W. Parker. And obviously, when you come to Google, you'll see a bunch of things if you put in my name. And on the Amazon, there's that. And if you want to go to my Twitter, is quite lively. And I shared this on there, for example, and that's twitter.com, Sean B.W. Parker. It's all Sean B.W. Parker, except for the Empowering the Innocent, the False Allegations Watch. Just put that into Google, False Allegations Watch, and there's a Wix site there with the 100 articles that we've covered. If that's your area of the actual writing, then that's where all the articles are of me and other people on there. All of these cases I've talked about. Do have a look at the John Lee Osborne one to be have a good education about how Britain's handling the stuff that we'll be talking about tonight.
Awesome.
Today.
Awesome. Guys, definitely check out everything that he just said. Go on over, follow him on Twitter, and check out the website, check out the book, check out everything. This is a really awesome thing that they're doing, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to sit down and talk about it. Definitely, when you're done checking all of those things out, if you haven't already, check out these social medias across the bottom. You guys should all be following me on everything by now. But I have two really awesome announcements for you. I have two in-person shows coming up. So in 2 weeks, Wednesday night, I've got Ben Heckman and Kyle. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. It's been too long of a day. He's going to hate me for this, but it's okay. We're talking about the music industry and how they got their start in the music industry and kind of projecting their political opinions and their activism into their art. And then we've got Mark Pellegrino and Spike Cohen in a special Fight Club episode, again in person in Pittsburgh. I'll have more information for you guys about that probably next week, but they're going to be debating about the true meanings of capitalism. So definitely check that out. It'll be live probably in about 3 weeks, or not live. It'll be up for you guys to watch it in about 3 weeks. But Sean, thank you so much for coming on. This is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much, David. Having a great time. We're really getting to the heart of everything. Wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, thanks again for coming on. Check us back here next week. Until then, keep up the fight.